Truck drivers of Reddit. While traveling through the night, what is the creepiest thing you've ever seen? NSFW. About 2 weeks ago, he was driving through the mountains when he noticed a car pulled over on the side of the road, parked really strangely, crooked, almost like it had been abandoned or stopped in a hurry. That set off some alarms for him, so he instinctively slowed down just to be cautious. As he approached a sharp cliffside bend, his headlights suddenly lit up a disturbing scene. A man was dragging a screaming woman by the hair right on the edge of the road. The guy looked up, locked eyes with my brother-in-law, then abruptly yanked the woman up and shoved her straight into the path of his oncoming truck before taking off back toward the oddly parked car. Thankfully, my brother-in-law had already slowed down because of the weirdly parked vehicle. He slammed on the brakes and managed to stop just 5 feet short of hitting the woman, who was now lying in the road. He immediately jumped out to check on her. The woman was shaken and kept repeating that she didn't know the guy and that she had just asked him for a ride after, but wouldn't say what after meant. We're assuming it might have been something like a hookup or work-related, maybe a stripper or sex worker, though that's just speculation. She begged him for a ride, but he decided that wasn't safe, so he called the cops and waited with her until they arrived. It was a wild situation, but the upside? His boss totally understood why he was 2 hours late for deliveries that day and let it slide. I've had to swerve around a few people who looked like they were trying to end it all, always at night, always out of nowhere. One time, it was a man in a full suit, just standing there with a briefcase like he was waiting for a bus. I slowed down, steered around him, and kept it moving. Got on the CB right after to warn the other drivers. Trucker here. Honestly, the creepiest thing I've experienced on the road wasn't some ghost story. It was the wind. I was driving along. Everything seemed calm. I couldn't hear or feel anything unusual in my truck. But the truck in front of me, it suddenly lifted off the ground and flipped onto its side, just like that, out of nowhere. It might not sound all that creepy, but when you're right behind a rig and it looks like it just floated up and tipped over with no warning, yeah, it's a little unsettling. Not a truck driver myself, but I've got a friend who is, and his creepiest story is always the same. He was parked overnight somewhere in Oklahoma, not alone this time. His wife was with him. He's Mexican, and she's black. In the middle of the night, they woke up to the sight of a Klan gathering happening nearby. Full robes, cross burning, the whole thing. As soon as they realized what was going on, they didn't move a muscle. Just stayed low, kept the lights off, and waited it out until sunrise. Definitely one of those moments where staying quiet felt like the only safe option. My dad's been a trucker for nearly 30 years, mostly driving night shifts. He doesn't usually see anything too wild, but every now and then, he comes back with stories that stick with you. He's talked about strange lights floating like glowing bubbles above a forest. Unnaturally tall hitchhikers. Others soaked in blood. Figures deep in the trees, dragging what looked like dead animals. But the one that really gets me? He once stopped for dinner at a truck stop, parked for the night, and went to sleep like usual. When he woke up the next morning, the place was completely abandoned, falling apart, broken windows, rusted signs. Like it had been empty for years. In 12 years on the road, I haven't seen much I'd call truly creepy. Most of the time, it's just long hours and tricks your tired mind plays on you, like shadows suddenly looking like animals darting into the road. Sometimes I'll pass someone walking along the shoulder, only to glance in the mirror and see nothing there. But the ones that really get under your skin, it's those people who just stare at you, mouth open, eyes locked on your cab as you drive by. No reaction, no blink. Just watching. It's not loud or dramatic, but it stays with you. I used to ride along with my uncle on a few night runs. He'd have Coast to Coast AM playing on a radio and would talk about weird stuff he'd seen on the road. But honestly, the most messed up thing that ever happened to him wasn't paranormal. It was hitting a man on the interstate. All lanes were full, no room to swerve. He assumed the guy had jumped from an overpass. It happened so fast, the man landed right in front of his truck. With a full load, he did everything he could to slow down, but there was no avoiding it. He described it like hitting a large animal, just bump, bump, and then silence. Later, they found out the man hadn't jumped. He'd been dragged up the overpass and thrown off, murdered. Multiple vehicles hit him afterward, none able to avoid it. My uncle said that realization, that someone had been killed and left like that, haunted him far more than if it had been a suicide. He's also seen strange lights around air bases, where some of the aircraft weren't anything he recognized. He's got theories, but it's that night on the interstate that really stuck with him. I used to work as a recruiter for a trucking company, and let me tell you, truckers have no shortage of wild stories. Can't say for sure if this one's true, but it's one of those classics that gets passed around. A driver pulls into a truck stop for the night and notices a lot lizard climbing down from truck. She casually walks over to a puddle, squats down to wash herself, then heads straight over to the next truck like it's just part of the routine. Not exactly the kind of thing you'd expect to see with your morning coffee. My dad, yeah, not me, sorry, is about as no-nonsense as they come. Straight shooter, no BS. So when he tells me something, I believe it. One early morning around 3 a.m., he was driving his tanker through the Scottish Highlands, with a long haul still ahead. Out of nowhere, he notices something pacing him in the next lane. It was a silver craft designed to look like a car, but it didn't have wheels. It was hovering about a foot off the ground. After following my dad's truck for a short while, it suddenly shot off at an insane speed, but somehow still stayed perfectly in its lane. He has no idea what it was. His best guess, some kind of experimental military tech. Whatever it was, he said it was seriously creepy. I was deep into a triple-day run, barely sneaking in enough naps in the sleeper to keep the DOT off my back. It was one of those desert moments somewhere outside Barstow, running on no dozen, chasing dawn somewhere near Nebraska if I kept pushing. The shadows started flickering just outside my headlights, and I knew it was time to pull over, if only for a quick break. I stopped at this rest area with a little diner attached. Inside, there were just a couple of other guys and a waitress who looked absolutely wiped out. I sat down and ordered coffee and waffles. She didn't catch me at first. Had to repeat myself louder. Coffee and waffles. She laughed a little, probably a smoker's laugh, and went to get my order. The coffee was strong, the waffles hit the spot, and I felt a bit more human when I got back on the road. Then, just as I was about to speed out of Kansas, I saw something that stuck with me. A woman running from the rest stop completely topless. I still made my drop early, but that unexpected moment was the real bonus of the run. This isn't my story, but one my dad told me years ago. It's one of those classic friend of friend tales, so it might just be a tall tale, but it's worth sharing anyway. Back in the 60s or early 70s, a trucker hauling a load of new cars was driving through the desert at night on a two-lane highway when suddenly his headlights went out. The truck itself was running fine, and he still had his parking lights, but they barely provided enough light to keep driving safely. He tried everything to fix the headlights with no luck. Then he had an idea. His car hauler had 2 layers of cars, and one of the cars was positioned high enough that its headlights could shine right over the cab. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough light to get him to the next town. So he climbed up, switched on the headlights of that new car, then hopped back in the cab, feeling pretty clever. A few miles down the road, he spotted a car coming the other way. The car stopped as they passed, then pulled completely off the road up ahead. Curious, the trucker stopped and asked if everything was okay. The other driver sheepishly admitted, "Well, when I saw how high up those lights were, I couldn't help but wonder just how damn wide that thing might be." They both shared a laugh and went on their way. Not exactly creepy, but definitely a fun story to pass around. My grandfather worked as a truck driver at a lumber yard for about 25 years after World War II. One story he shared always stuck with me. He and a co-worker left the yard together one day. Usually my grandfather would lead, but this time his co-worker insisted on taking the front. They were cruising down the highway when a car suddenly cut in front of the co-worker's truck without checking. His co-worker slammed on the brakes hard. My grandfather, following close behind, hit his brakes too and managed to slide into the left lane just in time to avoid a crash. Unfortunately, the car ended up being rear-ended by the co-worker's truck. My grandfather pulled over and ran back to check on his friend, only to find the load of lumber had shifted forward violently during the sudden stop, crushing the cab and fatally injuring his co-worker. Having fought in the Pacific during the war, my grandfather had seen his share of horrors, but he said this moment was especially hard. In war, you brace yourself for death, but in civilian life, you never expect something so brutal to happen right in front of you. I was busy cherry-picking the rotor wheel while I had about 7 hitchhikers knots flapping in the wind. My rig couldn't handle more than that because the sprocket monkey we keep in the back was rattling around the whole trip. Anyway, I spotted 4 hitchhikers in the middle of the night walking toward a long, straight stretch of road, about 40 miles of nothing. It was freezing cold, and I figured no one would be passing by anytime soon on that route. So, I decided to pick them up. I slowed down to about 100 feet in front of them, checked my rear view mirror, and as soon as I stopped, all 4 of them took off running into the night. It was probably in the low 20s, and there wasn't a town for at least 35 miles. I never heard what happened to them. Nothing ever showed up in the papers. Not so much creepy as downright pants-shittingly startling. It was around 2:30 a.m., somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, or at least I think it was. It's been over a decade. I hadn't seen another vehicle for at least an hour. That kind of place is dangerous at that hour because no matter how well rested you are, tiredness sneaks up on you. The lack of any stimulation makes you sleepy way faster than you'd expect. I was always taught that if something with four legs walked out in front of my truck, the best thing to do was brace for impact and just hit it. Yeah, it might tear the hell out of the tractor, but slamming on the brakes can cause a jackknife or rollover. Fixing a tractor is cheaper than fixing a tractor, a trailer, and replacing the destroyed cargo after a rollover. Plus, if you roll your rig, good luck ever getting hired by a decent company again. Now, this next part might sound exaggerated. My brain might have dialed it up a notch, but I'm not making it up just for the story. Suddenly, out of nowhere, it felt like 100 tumbleweeds rolled right into the middle of the highway. And some of them were massive, like the size of a large SUV. It completely freaked me out. The most scared I've ever been was driving over Donner Pass one night in late April. I had checked the weather reports beforehand, and the only warning was light snow flurries at the highest elevations. California is strict about this. They'll issue mandatory chain restrictions if conditions get bad, so I checked the SAE DOT website, and no restrictions were in place. When I rolled through the inspection station at Truckee, they asked if we had chains, but there was still no call to put them on. About 10 miles up the road, everything changed. The sky opened up into the worst whiteout blizzard I've ever experienced. Visibility dropped to barely 50 feet. There had been a truck ahead of me, but I completely lost sight of his lights. Only the tracks he left in the snow were visible. I slowed down to about 20 miles per hour, trying to stay steady. Then the wind kicked up, blowing and swirling the snow in every direction. I started feeling this crazy vertigo, like I was tumbling through the air. I had to lock my eyes onto those tire tracks in front of me and pray that the other driver hadn't slid off the road. I made it through, thankfully. The blizzard lasted about 30 miles before turning into heavy rain. After that, I told my dispatcher flat out, if I ever had to cross Donner Pass at night with any snow in the forecast again, I was shutting down until daylight. Not a truck driver myself, but I used to work with a guy who did evening shifts and walked home. Part of his route cut through a road line with trees, so at night it felt pretty creepy and isolated when you were driving through. To mess with people, whenever a car passed by, he'd start walking like a zombie just to freak them out. One night, I was driving through that same stretch and saw him doing the zombie walk. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Turns out he wasn't just joking around, he really did it. I was hauling the rig around midnight through a foggy patch in Kansas when I had to slam on the brakes for something on the tracks. As I got closer, I saw this weird deer human type figure. I went back to grab my phone to get a better look, but by the time I returned, it was gone. Yeah, I noped right out of there. I'm working nights at a job that has me driving around town nonstop for hours, like from 11:30 p.m. to 8:30 a.m. Naturally, some weird stuff happens during those hours. First, I was rolling through a residential neighborhood and stopped at a four-way stop. I glanced over, and there was a man wearing nothing but tidy whities, a kid-sized bike helmet, and roller skates. Yeah, I didn't hang around, drove off pretty quick after that. Another time, I saw a guy who'd just been mugged, lying on the ground in an apartment complex parking lot. When I pulled in, I noticed a car screeching out with its lights off, but didn't think much of it until I saw the guy. I called the cops and took off, but stuck around the area and saw him get loaded into an ambulance about 5 minutes later. As for wildlife, it's mostly the usual suspect around here. Deer, coyotes, raccoons, skunks, foxes, you name it. The other day, I was driving slow down a street and spotted a coyote near the road. I pulled over to get a better look, and this coyote locked eyes with me, squatted, and then just dropped the deuce right in front of me without breaking eye contact. It was weirdly majestic, the way he kicked some grass on it and trotted off, looking totally proud of himself. I got ramrodded by a cardigan convoy on the back nine of the last stretch of I-59, a real tough crew too. A bunch of pack you before they meet you types. I held steady, like I always do, but the crack of dawn just wouldn't come for me. Anyway, I fumbled for my brights, and when I finally flipped them on, I caught a sign in my mirror that said "Stid on." I thought, what the hell is "Stid on"? Then it hit me. I was looking through my mirror. This isn't my story, but my dad's. One night, in the middle of nowhere, a guy was walking down the highway dressed all in black while it was pouring rain. The next morning, he was found mangled by the roadside. That stretch of highway sees a lot of truck traffic through the night. My dad is pretty sure he was one of the trucks that hit the guy, probably after the initial impact. He said the weather that night was so bad, and with all the bumps in the road and animals like kangaroos to dodge, you start tuning out strange noises and just keep driving. I was driving my Volvo down the highway on my way to Stuttgart, just a normal night ride. Then, out of nowhere, another truck came barreling right at me, going around 100 kilometers per hour, its high beams blinding me. For a moment, I thought, oh boy, this is how my driving career ends. I kept honking, but the truck didn't slow down. It was like the driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. At the last second, I swerved right while the other truck kept straight. And bam, it crashed. The whole rig was wrecked. I just kept driving, pulled over for a second, and told myself, well, that was close. Then I exited my Euro Truck Simulator 2 game and called it a night. My uncle from Guatemala drives trucks all across the country, and his stories still make me seriously shit my pants. The scariest one by far is when he said he was taking a nap on top of the truck's bed, and suddenly he looked over and saw this very elderly woman. He described her as having insanely long nails, stringy white hair, and being so hunched over was almost unnatural. He was in the middle of nowhere, but he watched her enter a tiny cave, candle in hand. That was enough for him. He noped right out of there. That's some real third world witchcraft stuff you definitely won't see in the States. There was this one time early in my driving career when I pushed myself way too far and was beyond exhausted. I swear, I saw a huge boat on a trailer driving right beside me, but with no truck pulling it. Just a boat rolling down the highway all on its own. Somehow, my brain completely failed to register the truck that was supposed to be there. Then, to top it off, I saw a giant tree suddenly growing right in the middle of the highway, just ahead of me. Yeah, it was way past my bedtime. After that, I never pushed sleep deprivation that far again. I'm not a trucker, but once when I was driving from Texas to California, way out in the middle of nowhere, I saw flames up ahead. As I got closer, there was a car on fire right in the middle of the road. Normally, that wouldn't be too creepy. Except I was deep in the desert, driving for hours with nothing around for miles. A total wasteland. Of course, I stopped to check if anyone was inside. No one. But then I thought I heard banging coming from the trunk, like something hitting the inside. It could have been something about to explode, sure, but I couldn't shake the feeling someone might be trapped in there. The fire was too intense to get close or try to open it. I pulled out my phone to call 911. No signal. That's when it hit me. Maybe I just stumbled on a murder, and whoever did this might be nearby, watching. So I got out of there as fast as I could. Once I had signal again, I called the police and told them everything. Hours later, they called back to confirm the location. But they didn't find a thing. So yeah, that's my creepy story. It was late, pouring rain, and I was on I-85 North just outside downtown Atlanta, nearing the Peachtree Street Bridge. Flashing emergency lights cut through the gloom ahead. Traffic was heavy, but moving until a cop singled me out, stopping all lanes. I was front row to a nightmare. A single car sat sideways in the center lane, already hooked to a wrecker, but not yet lifted. Police and emergency personnel surrounded it, all staring, their faces grim. A police photographer's flash was the only way to glimpse the scene, each burst momentarily illuminating the chaos. As the wrecker began to lift the car, the photographer's flashes became a frantic strobe. And then, as the vehicle rose, something massive began to slide from the front driver's side wheel well. My eyes were fixed, straining to comprehend. Flash. A woman's bloody body flopped onto the wet asphalt. Darkness. Flash. There she was again, shredded clothes, caked in blood and road grime. The flashes continued, a horrifying stop-motion sequence. It was more disturbing than any movie script. Even now, I can't shake the question. Who was she? A pedestrian? A jumper? A passenger? No one deserves an end like that. A cop waved me on, but the unimaginable sight, still flashing in my mind, came with me. I'm not a truck driver, but I work as a train engineer. Over the years, I've hit plenty of animals on the tracks. It's almost routine. Even the big ones usually just bounce off the train without much fuss. One night, as we were rolling through a stretch of track, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. A deer was casually making its way up the ballast and stepping right onto the middle of the rails. It didn't seem the least bit worried about the train barreling toward it. When we were about 50 feet away, the buck looked up directly at us. Thanks to the reflection from the headlights, its eyes glowed a bright, eerie red, locked onto the cab like a pair of burning embers. The impact was sudden and violent. The deer exploded against the front of the train, sending pieces flying in all directions. The worst part was when the head bounced up, hitting the nose of the cab before slamming against the windshield. Exactly 10 years ago tonight, right along this very stretch of road, thick fog just like this blanketed everything. That night, I witnessed the worst accident I've ever seen. There was this terrifying sound, like a garbage truck falling from the Empire State Building, crashing down with unimaginable force. When they finally pulled the driver's body from the twisted, burning wreckage, it was a sight I'll never forget. I was driving an Antelope. I assume you mean a vehicle called Antelope, over 75 through a twisted rock slide in Kansas. I stopped at a gas station to grab a drink, but the moment I walked inside, I was met by a faceless puppet. Without warning, it pulled out a gun and pointed it at me. Then, shockingly, it turned the gun on itself and fired. I didn't hesitate. I ran out of there as fast as I could. My dad used to drive a log truck, and one night, really late, he was about 30 minutes from home when he suddenly got a strong feeling that he needed to get off the freeway. No real reason, just a gut feeling. So he took a slower back road that ran parallel to the freeway. Between that road and the highway was this massive gravel pit, easily 100 yards wide and about 50 feet deep. Some guy had been selling gravel out of it for years. As my dad passed by, he happened to glance down into the pit and saw something strange. A pair of headlights pointed toward him, away from the freeway. In front of them, he could make out the shape of someone sitting on the ground. It gave him an uneasy feeling. He slowed down and tried to get a better look. From what he could tell, it looked like a van, but that was about all he could make out in the dark. The next day, news broke. A woman had been found in that very pit. Her throat had been slit and her head bludgeoned. My dad gave a statement, but unfortunately, he hadn't seen anything that could really help identify the person responsible. They eventually caught the killer. He was driving a van about 2 months later. My grandpa, a tank commander in WWII's European theater, carried the weight of two particularly brutal memories. One involved a friend killed by a sniper in a supposedly secure town. His buddy, riding atop the tank ahead, was hit and died instantly. The other haunting moment came from a bomb dropped by a plane. He and a friend dove for cover under a tree, but only my grandpa emerged. His friend was shredded by shrapnel, dying right beside him. I can't fathom enduring such horrors day after day. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and we will see you in the next video.